So this is going to be kind of a runner's take on the AirPods Pro. Before I get into the sort of in-depth review of my experience running with these things, I did want to sort of just broadly cover a little bit of what I think about them. These are a terrific improvement over the previous AirPods, and they are a really great sounding in-ear headphone in general. They have a nice low frequency response, although I would say they're fairly neutral, which is probably a good thing. They pair really nicely with Apple products because of that H1 chip, and you're also going to get that new feature of being able to share audio with a second Bluetooth device, particularly AirPods. So you can do AirPods. I think Beats also have some compatibility there, but mainly it's just these for now. Be nice if they added real, other headphones, honestly, because as nice as these are, they are primarily a great option because of their convenience. If you really care about sound quality, over-the-ear headphones are going to do a better job in most cases. Certainly, really low-end options aren't going to do aren't going to pull things off as well. But other over-the-ear headphones in this similar price range, or even a little bit higher, really are a noticeable step up over these. That said, I haven't really been able to come across anything else in the market this small and this convenient that sound as good as this does. The ANC is also really very good. It's not as good as an over-the-ear headphone. It's not going to blow away anything else on the market. Probably my biggest complaint with it would be that you can still hear people talking next to you if you're not currently listening to music. But it does work really nicely at allowing you to focus on what you're listening to and drown out some of that surrounding sound. So why don't we get outside and see what we can hear. So how do these fare for exercising outdoors? Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. One really common complaint with the original first and second generation AirPods was that they would fall out of your ears if you tried to use them while exercising. Now, my solution to this had been, for the last few years, to use these little aftermarket silicone winged tips that you could put on the edge of them and then take them off pretty easily to put back in the case. And it worked pretty well. It also didn't isolate too much of the surrounding noise. Sorry, I'm looking around for traffic. Which was a really good thing from a safety standpoint. Typically, in-ear headphones cut out a lot more ambient sound, and when exercising outdoors, it can be a safety concern. The design of the new AirPods Pro is a break from the more opened earbud design of the standard model. As I'm sure you've seen, these introduce a silicone tip, which plugs up your ear more than the previous EarPods and AirPods before them. What this means for exercising is you're isolated from the surrounding environment more so than you would be with normal EarPods. The good thing is that these do stay in your ears a lot better. In order to pump in some ambient sound, they do have an external microphone and also right here an internal microphone combined with a proximity sensor so these know when they're in your ears. The idea behind this is if you're exercising outdoors, you would go into transparency mode, allowing you to hear the ambient environment, but also listen to your music. ANC drowns out so much surrounding noise that it's potentially a safety concern. So by going into transparency mode, you can hear what's going on around you and hopefully not get hit by a bus. This has its drawbacks though. As I pointed out, that microphone is right on the outside of the earbud. What that means is that wind hits right against it on a windy day. You'll also see that I'm wearing a hat. It's pretty cold here in New York this morning. It's about 40 degrees and I'm wearing a hat. And in the last few days of testing, I was also wearing my hood instead of the hat. The hat and the hood will ruffle against the edge of that microphone, creating a kind of friction against the microphone that you can hear when in transparency mode. What that means is it actually isn't so great when using outdoors. What I've found I've been doing when I'm out here running is disabling transparency mode and disabling noise cancellation. That leaves you with the sort of off state, the traditional in-ear headphone experience of normal silicone in-ear headphones. And it does isolate a bit more of the surrounding environment, but I can still hear a bit. It's not noise canceling to the degree that ANC would be. Another thing I find a little awkward about them is the previous generation had this very broad gesture where you would bang on the side of the earpod. I mean, you could kind of tap on it. But if you were wearing a hat, it was nice because out running, you could just kind of broadly knock yourself on the side of the head twice to advance tracks or activate Siri or whatever you have your control set up to do. With these, you have to have this more fine motor grasp of the little stem here and squeeze it. That's fine under normal circumstances, but when you're running, it's difficult to grab onto that without dislodging the earbud from your ear. One other note on that, now when I'm not wearing a hat like I am today, while the earbuds do stay in my ears very well while running, I did find a couple of times after about a mile that I did have to push them back in. Not a big deal, and I could tell that they were getting a little bit looser, but they don't completely stay in like something that wraps around the outer part of your ear would. Of course, the really nice thing about these is the active noise cancellation, which is great for drowning out surrounding sounds. It's not as good for voices. If you're not listening to music and somebody's speaking right next to you, you can probably hear them pretty clearly. Honestly, my biggest complaint with these with regard to exercising is how unideal transparency mode is for running outdoors. And if I disable ANC and transparency, you're left with that kind of talking in your head, congested feeling of having a silicone-based in-ear headphone in your ear, which I find really uncomfortable. And honestly, I'm not sure which is worse, having the rustling sound of the microphones in transparency mode or the kind of thumpy silence of, the thumpy, breathier silence of the disabled ANC. One of the reasons I think that this is the case is that in active noise cancellation mode, these earbuds have a microphone inside of your ear that picks up a little bit of your own voice and a little bit of sort of internal air while still being able to cancel out exterior noise. It makes even ANC sound more natural than having ANC disabled. When ANC is disabled, not only do they disable active noise canceling, obviously, but they also disable that internal microphone, which leaves me with this very voice in my head sensation that I find really uncomfortable. One other note on that, that's also the case when you're talking on the phone. I found talking on the phone with these, with ANC disabled, to be very uncomfortable, despite the fact that I could hear the person on the other end of the line really clearly. Now, ANC is not all bad news. If you plan on using these inside of a gym, then ANC is fantastic, and it's a heck of a lot more comfortable than using over-the-ear headphones like so many people you see at the gym now. These are kind of effortless. They do cancel out enough background noise that it's not uncomfortable. You can still sort of hear what's around you, but it drowns out that hum of the other machines and the other people, lets you focus on just working out. And that's really nice. So a quick note on the controls. If you squeeze and hold for about a second, you can cycle between a few options for the ANC. It can either be ANC on, or transparency mode is the default, and then you can also add a third cycle to include, which would be the ANC off. Probably what you'll end up preferring is to only have the two options of ANC enabled and transparency mode. That's because those are probably the most likely modes that you'll be in, and being able to quickly jump into transparency mode from having ANC enabled is really nice. Having to do that twice, that press and hold multiple times to cycle through them, is a little less convenient. One really nice thing if you have an Apple Watch, especially if you're going to be running, is because, as I've mentioned, you might prefer when outdoors to use the ANC off mode. Since you won't be able to get into it directly from the stock here, there's a few other ways. One is that you can ask Siri to do it for you, and she'll switch modes that way. Alternately, there is a slightly different interface on the Apple Watch that allows you to switch between as well. So I'll show you that. So one really nice feature about the way that this is handled with the Apple Watch is if you're listening to music, you can just tap on the little button here, and it gives you the options to switch between off, noise cancellation, and transparency right here. In conclusion, I think these are a great product. I do think that for running outdoors, if you can deal with putting on little silicone tips, I actually think that it might be preferable for running outdoors if you just want to listen to some music. I also do find that these are a little less ideal if you just plan on popping one in and listening to, say, a podcast while you're among other people, say doing the dishes or something like that. They do a nice job of cutting out some ambient noise, which makes doing some of those tasks a little bit more comfortable instead of having to bump up the volume. Although honestly, the ANC, while it is very good on these for what they are, it's not going to cut out everything. You're still going to hear background noise. You're still going to hear people talking in particular. And I really hope that Apple makes some changes to improve the experience when using these with ANC disabled and not in transparency mode. I'd really like to see what happens if they enable that internal microphone to allow you to sort of hear yourself more naturally, even though the surrounding environment isn't being amplified by transparency mode. Overall, I think these are terrific. I'm still on the fence about whether I personally want to use these or wait for an update to the standard AirPods. My wife does like these a lot, so she's probably taken this pair after I swab them off. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did like what you saw here, this is, I think, the second video that I'll have published on the channel. I'm still working on a video on the Bowers & Wilkins PX7s. This stuff is taking me quite a while because I have a day job. If you do like what you're seeing, please, like, subscribe, add a comment, criticize, please. I'd love to hear what people think. Still working on these, and hopefully each of them will be a little bit better than the last. Anyway, good luck.